Welcome to Shannon's Design to Driveway. I'm Warren Brown, and joining me in this original Shannon series is motor historian David Burrell, and we're really excited about our guest designer in this episode. It's the late 1950s in St. Genevieve, Missouri, a small town on the Mississippi River, and a young man starts out making cameras with his grandfather. After almost 10 years, he moves to the family car dealership to try his hand selling new Studebakers. Then, through the sliding doors of life, something fairly dramatic happens. His name is Leo Pruneau. As a young man thinking he'd either make cameras or sell Studebakers for the rest of his life, Leo ends up styling some of the iconic cars of the 1960s, 70s and 80s, and in the USA, the UK, and fortunately for us, in Australia too. David, I think Holden fans and every motoring enthusiast will enjoy meeting Leo Pruneau.
Studebaker used to send out brochures and stuff like that. Every week you'd get some information from Studebaker. And you know, I just read that just line after line after line. Because I knew more about it than the old man knew about it, I think. And so when it came time to ordering the stock for him, he let me do that. I'd pick out the which model, which body style, what trim color, what powertrain. And then one day on the newsstand, I looked and there was a magazine there from California. It was Motor Trend. And all of a sudden, on one of the issues, I see an advertisement for it. Learn to become a car designer. Art Center School, Los Angeles, California. And I thought, oh my God, how would that ever be possible? I wasn't very hopeful, quite frankly. In the matter of just a few weeks, there's been a vacancy, and come out if you're still interested. But there were 70 of us that started in that class, and in the end, there were only 7 of us left. I just wanted to draw cars. But they really weren't interested in making cars. It turns out that after the 4th semester, you could apply for a scholarship. We have a Ford, we have a Chrysler, we have a General Motors scholarship. I took the General Motors scholarship because General Motors was number 1. We finish up school and our last days there, and out comes Bill Mitchell. He already knew who he was going to hire and who he wasn't going to hire, so to speak. The 2 of us got hired at the end of the semester, and it was myself and Wayne Cady. The way it worked in those days, when you were hired by GM, you went into what they call the orientation studio. And if you stayed in that studio probably more than 3 or 4 months, chances are you weren't going to go any farther. Wayne and I both get taken out of the studio and get permanent assignments. And Wayne went to Cadillac, and I went to Advanced Studio 3. Wayne liked to draw big cars, and I liked to draw little cars, so to speak. But Wayne was a terrific illustrator. He could sketch in watercolor. And he would just absolutely, knock everybody's teeth out from an illustrating standpoint. But from a design standpoint, we weren't too different. I didn't.
Oh, come on, boys, move it out of the way.
Morning, David. Where's the tea?
It won't be a moment, Joe.
Paul Gillow comes in and he says, here, this is a little English car. It's called a Vauxhall Viva. And they need a taillight design. Anyway, that was the very first job I was doing, a Viva taillight. And I never saw one until I got to England. So apart from that little Viva taillight that I was working on, everything else that we did in advance was pretty free. We got our first major assignment. GM were getting ready to do a new A-body. And the people who were involved with using the A-body, the Chevrolet division, the Pontiac division, and the Oldsmobile division, those 3 production studios would come up with a concept that was going to form the basis for the car, the basic body shell, the Fisher body part in actual fact. But because each division then, once they take that middle part of the car, the Fisher body part, they'd put their own front and back on it and engines and so on, suspensions and so on and so forth. The idea was to come up with a common center part of the car. Mitchell decided at the last minute that he might like to have a 4th contender, which would be one of the Advanced Studios, because he wanted to try something that the other guys couldn't do. On our design, we could use curved glass. But other than that, the package was exactly the same. We were in competition with the Chevy, Pontiac, and Oldsmobile Studios. There was only just two of us working on the car, myself and Don Lasky. We knew that once we got our clay model finished, it would be a shootout. Whose good design was going to be best? We came up with the name Solaris. So we made a badge, put it on the sides and on the deck lid and what have you. And it turns out that the Solaris got selected for the design, the basic design. And Mitchell was very pleased with that because he got to sell his curved glass.
Let's put the Solaris into perspective. It was an incredibly important design. This very secret design exercise influenced the styling of just about every single GM car in the 1960s, globally.
Let's take a look at the magnificent new Holden. Note Holden's styling. It's functional, trend-setting, and years ahead because it's curved.
After we finished up with the Solaris, Don and I were given a little tiny studio, which we call the International Studio. And we got I got a job for you. And it's an overseas project again. He also announced that there would be the chief body engineer from Holden would come back and join us right when we're doing the clay models. And Reg Hall was the guy. And Reggie was there to make sure that, the glass tolerance or the glass clearances and the door cuts and everything was where it was supposed to be, So we finished the design, which was based loosely on the Solaris. For some reason, Mitchell really liked the design, and he wanted to perpetrate that on some other GM cars. Holden decided it had to have a 9 inches of ground clearance. And that was just extraordinary. Most cars had about 5.5, 6 at the most. It was such an awkward shape, and Mitchell, when he got the job, he was reluctant to even say we could do it, but he wanted to get into the overseas side of things. So he took it on. I remember him saying to the GM overseas officials, look, we'll make the car to your specification, but it won't look very good. We finished up the car and did both the sedan and the station wagon. And Mitchell decided that it looked too short. He had just finished the Oldsmobile Toronado with the big fins sticking out the front. He said, we'll put some of those on. And then Reg Hall, the body engineer, stood up and said, look, Bill, I can't make that. I can't farm that. It's too complicated. Can't make that out of sheet metal. And so we had to cut it back then. So we cut it back to what Reggie wanted. Mitchell come in and look at what Reggie wanted to do and put it back on again. And if you'd had a time-lapse camera there, you'd have seen this front end going in and out over a period of about several weeks. Mitchell comes into the studio, worked all night on the damn thing, putting the long front end back on it. And the next day, Reggie didn't come out by himself like I thought he might do. He came out with all the rest of the overseas executives. And they walked in the studio, into the dome there, and we had the long front end on it. And we knew damn good and well, or Reggie knew damn good and well, he knew it had the long front end on it. And but he couldn't say anything because he would have lost face. And as far as the overseas executives were concerned, that was the design of the car, and that was it. Our studio was pretty small, but we better get something going. So I said to Don, well, let's just do a coupe. And I made some drawings. Jordan had come in a couple of times and looked at it and thought it was going good. Jordan brings Mitchell over to look at our little car, the coupe body we were working on. And Mitchell says, oh, well, that's pretty good. Send that over to the Chevy studio. Well, I think it became the 65 Chevrolet Impala coupe. And I got transferred over to what they call the body design studio. It was a great big studio next door. And we had heard that this little Viva was coming over. They arrived, we pulled the drapes off, and shit, it wasn't any better than the old one. David Jones was the design director from England, and he had come over to make the presentation to Bill. And Mitchell makes about 3 laps around the car. And he says, Pruno, we need a new design. We're going out to lunch, and we'll be back at 3 o'clock. I want a new design, a new full-size tape drawing. So I'm taping away, full-size, and watching the clock, and, nearly in a panic state. But anyway, the clock ticks around to 3 o'clock, and shit, in walks David Jones and Bill Mitchell. Mitchell's idea of lunch was about 6 martinis, and I'm sure that David Jones couldn't handle that. But anyway, Mitchell walks in, he walks over the drawing, and I'm standing there, and that's it. Take the drawing down. David's got to get on an airplane at 5 o'clock. Gave him the drawing. Take it back to England. I get a call one day from Mitchell's secretary. This is about 2 or 3 weeks later. You better go up to Mitchell's office. He wants to talk to you. I sat down, and Mitchell's still standing up, talking down to me, and he says, "Pruno, I want you to get over to England before the out." You know, I just bought a brand new, took delivery of a brand new GTO Pontiac, and I had a fairly new apartment. But if Mitchell says you want to go to England, you better go. We got to England, and there was a guy standing there in a gray outfit with a Vauxhall badge on his hat. That was who was looking for me, sort of thing. Made an accommodation for me in St. Albans at the White Hart Hotel. And I go upstairs with the suitcases, and the room was about 3 feet wide. It was so narrow, I couldn't get my suitcase open, if you can believe that. The clerk said, "Vauxhall's left a car here for you." I said I had just got out of a GTO Pontiac, and which is pretty high, you know, one of the first muscle cars. And I got in this little Viva, and I honest to God thought it was powered with a rubber band, like a model airplane. It was just a piss weak, you know. Anyway, next day I found my way out to Vauxhall. Went over and had a look straight away at the Viva that they were working on, and they were following the drawings exactly. So I was quite pleased with that. And all I had to do was put a front, you know, grill and a back end on it, and I just did what I wanted to do. David Jones never bothered me, but never had any input on it. And just did it. And of course, when we got it all finished, and the UK market went from about 10.5% up to about 16 or so.
Leo was assistant design director at Vauxhall only 3 years after starting at GM. Leo's successors put him on the GM fast track, and the next stop in 1969 was Holden as its assistant design director. These were busy times. Finalise the HQ, then start work on the HJ, the HX and the HZ. Then there was the Gemini and the LH and LX Tirana models.
In the case of the A9X, I didn't know anything about that car. That was done between Harry Firth and the Holden engineers. And Harry explains to me that he wants to put this, they've got this big V8 in it, but he wants to put a certain kind of carburetor on it and trumpets, and they're going to stick through the hood. And he said, we need to have some kind of a cover, a scoop over the top of it. So he said, "Can you do something for me?" I said, yeah, you just give me the dimensions, whatever you need. And he said, "No, this is where it goes, and I got to have, I don't know, 4 inches of clearance between the hood and the trumpets on the top of the carburetor." So anyway, we worked all night getting that scoop together. But I thought instead of putting the opening at the front of the thing, I knew the GM Corvettes were using the back of the scoop where the high pressure area was to make intake, and it also produced less drag. I got the model all done. Harry comes in the next day or so, and I explained to him what I'm doing, and he understood it straight away. That's the way the scoop came out, exactly. He just thought I was going to have a lot of problems with him on that, but understood it straight away. The genuine Holden-built A9Xs, well, they weren't Holden-built. They were V8 Tiranas that were sent to Cheney Patterson, the dealer. And then Cheney's got the cars in, and they just simply took electric saws and cut the old wheel arches off and put the new plastic ones over on top. Just literally sawed the old wheel arches off. The wheel arches and the scoop were part of the A9, because the A9X was done both as a four-door and as a coupe.
Styling and racing have always been closely aligned. Just like the shaker on the Falcon GTHO, Leo's bonnet scoop, inspired by his visit to Corvette, created a unique design for the A9X that signalled the car's legendary status.
Motorsport was really good for Holden. Win on Sunday and sell on Monday. And John Bagshaw, our sales engineer, he believed in that like no tomorrow. As the design director for Holden, I was responsible for the look of the Holden cars, of course. And I thought to myself, well, if I'm responsible for the look of Holden cars, I'm going to be responsible for the look of the Holden dealer team. Peter Brock was like one of the family. And you know, he just couldn't have had it any better. The corporation had decided in Detroit that they weren't going to go racing anymore. That's when they formed the Holden dealer team the second time around. So I came up with the idea for the Commodore. I made the mock-up. In fact, I had two Commodores there in the department. The story goes around that everybody thinks Peter Brock did design that car. And he didn't see that car till it was completely finished and released for production. So it had to go through all the engineering and everything to get it done and released for manufacturing. But because when people took that car out to Brocky to have some work done on it, after they had purchased it from the dealer, Brocky always put that Momo steering wheel on it with his name on it. And so everybody thought that Brocky had designed the car, but he actually had absolutely nothing to do with the thing from a design standpoint. So as a result, Brocky thought he could do it better than me. And he thought, well, so he started doing it, and that's when we began to have a bit of a disagreement on, and I didn't think he did some of the things quite right.
Leo doesn't hold back on his styling for the first Brock Commodore, does he? This was the car which established generations of Holden performance cars.
Well, the thing that always bothered me with the Commodore, we never got to have enough input into the car, from a design standpoint. It was handed to us on a plate because I wanted it to look different than Opel, because I always thought we could do it better than those guys, and we wanted our own DNA on it. We started off as a VB and VC. VH came in, but that was still the same. But VK, we got a chance to do something different. Got new plastic bumpers, a few other things. But the big thing that I wanted to do was to make a 6-window car. But Opel had a big car called a Senator, and it was a 6-window car. And I thought, well, I can make something like that, but I don't have to use as many pieces as Opel did. And all I did was just cut a hole in the quarter panel, so we needed a new quarter panel. And it was as simple as that. And after it went into production, of course, they saw the pictures in Germany. They sent their chief body engineer down here to see how we did that. And I would have thought that was something they could have figured out themselves, but they didn't. And he came down and he was quite impressed. And that whole WB program was a program that I really enjoyed working on. It's one of my favorites because I had to take a Kingswood and turn it into something that was going to be a Rolls-Royce here in Australia. I had to keep the windshield and the front door and the hood panel. Otherwise, the rest of the car was do whatever I wanted to. So the first thing we did was we put a longer roof on it. People think I was trying to do a Cadillac. The car that influenced that more than anything else was the Aston Martin Lagonda. Oh, I always liked that car. The chief body engineer came up, and Reggie, and he said, Leo, how would you like to make this grill? And I said, I'd like to make it just like Rolls-Royce. Anyway, we did that, and that grill is probably the most expensive grill that went on any Holden ever, and probably ever will be, because it was made, every one of those bars were individually assembled in that, by hand. Well, the LE program was an interesting program. I think they had 627 sets of Monaro panels, and they were just sitting out in the yard. Manufacturing wanted to get rid of these. So Bagshaw came to me one day and he said, could you put something together, Leo, some kind of he called it a white sale, and they'll all be the same, and they'll get rid of them, and that'll be the end of it. I played around with the idea that, well, this might be the last Monaro we'll make for a long time. Well, if this is going to be the last one, we're going to put our best suit on. But anything I knew I could get on that car from any other model that was a upgrade, I put it on. And Bagshaw comes over and we walk in, and I said, this ain't what you asked for, John, but this is what I think it ought to be. And he looked at it, and he says, oh, yeah, that's pretty good, Leo. I can sell that. I mean, the managing director didn't know anything about it. The chief engineer didn't know anything about it. It was just between Bagshaw and myself. Anyway, we go to the product policy meeting, and this was not time for the LE. And I don't think anybody even had a clue that it was going to be different than the white sail car. And I thought, well, I want to get next to the manufacturing director, because he has to make the thing, and he's a pretty hard-nosed guy to get along with. And anything that's other than a black car, he don't want to know about it. So anyway, I made sure I was next to him when we walked around the corner to see the car, and he just went into an absolute tirade about, all those stripes, I can't do that in the factory. And the managing director said, turned over to Bagshaw, and he says, what do you think, John? And John says, I like it. That's all it took. They made 627 was the number, one right after the other, all exactly the same. The first shipment, there was 40 cars in that shipment, along with Kingswoods and Premiers and everything for the dealers in Western Australia. And the damn warehouse caught on fire that night. It was the most expensive car that we made at the time, and we lost all 40 of them. You know, you'll never find anything much more than 585, 186, somewhere like that. The car that I had was the mock-up for the original prototype. I mean, it was actually used as a photography for the brochure, and that's the only LE that ever had a sunroof in it, because that was part of the specification. And Lloyd Beck was already so upset with doing all the stripes and everything on it that he couldn't possibly have handled a sunroof. And I would have liked to put my name on the CV Coupe that Mike Simcoe did. I just think that's the pinnacle of Australian car design. And I think the version that HSV made of the four-wheel drive, the Coupe 4, that was probably the best, technically the best car Australia's ever made. Probably would wound up thinking that I was going to make cameras for the rest of my life. Couldn't get the gasoline out of my blood. And the fact that I got hired by GM was a surprise in the first place. The fact that I did what I did, I would have never believed it.
And just like that, from small-town camera maker to global car designer over 3 decades is how I would describe Leo Pruneau. I just loved how Leo took the brief to clear 600 spare Monaro bodies in the yard, adding the styling of the LE Monaro classic of today. You still feel his pain of losing those cars in the fire. To me, Leo was a car guy who dared to dream. The WB Statesman could easily have been borrowed from Cadillac, but instead, Leo took aim from Aston Martin and Rolls-Royce. I mean, I can hear Leo arguing for a handmade front grille. What? You want us to make a handmade grille just like Rolls-Royce, Leo? Today, so many of our prized Holden classics in garages across Australia would never have happened if it were not for Leo. It's a privilege to celebrate Leo Pruneau on Shannon's Design to Driveway. In this episode, it's Ford product planner David Ford and the first ever Falcon GT, the XR, the classic Aussie muscle coupes, and how Ford's mantra to beat Holden led the charge in the design studio and on the racetrack.
Join Warren Brown and David Burrell in the new must-watch series Shannon's Design to Driveway. Watch now on the Shannon's Club.